Because remember, I've changed the argument. It's not really about good and evil. I've reframed it to a biological, modernist, secular interpretation plus a Homeric paradigm from Nietzsche about how the system is not a question of good versus evil. It's a question of master morality versus herd morality.
Okay, so you're taking on more of a stance of saying that the herd morality versus master morality dichotomy is like really accurate in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From a Darwinian Nietzschean perspective, yeah, from evolutionary biology plus the Ubermensch.
Okay, so that's the stance that you're kind of standing by, basically.
Yeah, same one from last time.
Okay. Okay. Um, yeah, so I don't know if I would exactly reference Schopenhauer, although I think that um I don't know much about Schopenhauer for one thing. Um, but the whole thing of this chaotic force, this almost like it makes me think of Tiamat, just the chaos, this this vim, this life force, this thing that shakes our life force that pushes us towards something. Yeah, I believe in such a thing. I don't mean to invoke that now. I think that perhaps some of us channel something like, for example, during World War II, a lot of people went out to fight and they wanted to fight and they wanted to go, get caught up in this very political time and such as at least as far as I've heard. But there is some Martian desire within man, but not just Martian. There's a desire within all of us anyways. So that's sort of my answer to that. That I think not exactly. I think maybe in some like metaphorical way there's some similarity to Schopenhauer. To some of it, it's appealing to my own logic and just what I feel is maybe self-evident without trying to beg what these thoughts may actually provoke as far as a conclusion. But I think that they're interesting. The thought experiments. They're interesting questions with which to interrogate the reality. And I think questions are a great way to interrogate the reality, and you know sometimes show the weaknesses of where something may not appear as solid as we think. But I'd also like to talk about you talked about the philosophers meant that the society was already dead. I think that that's maybe a little bit like the I almost want to say that's the like the father is mad at his gay son or whatever, or is mad at like your children are an expansion of you, and it's your consciousness, but it's the next step. And so I've noticed this a lot of times, and this is relevant. I'm saying this metaphorically, or I'm using this sort of metaphor um about the topic at hand. Like I see parents will be really upset with their children, especially as they get older, especially the sons, because the son is to the next step of what the father was thinking. It's like it's an iteration. It took it and it turned it at like some degree angle. It's the father was deep frying it. The son is stir frying it. Like, and there's this friction between generations because of that. And I think that's what this says to me a little bit. I've had this thought about Kali Yuga as well because I mentioned how the Hindu scriptures say something similar about different religions coming about, especially the Vishya Purana, which there's some what's the word controversy about the Vishya Purana because it's like newer. Um, similar things were prophesied about Kali Yuga and Bhagavata Purana. Not in nearly as much detail, but basically there's this idea that okay, now things are changing. Oh no, that's bad. And I think I would say, if we're becoming, isn't that a little bit like eating the fruit in the Garden of Eden? It's like, okay, now we're self-aware. Instead of the people before not knowing what morality it is just we live this life in this particular way. But to become self-aware and say, what is morality? What is, to me, that's more advanced, and I think I think it's a little bit almost like intellectually bankrupt to be like, oh, it's already over. I'm not saying that to you exactly, but I think it's an interesting way to look at the time and say maybe humanity is evolving a step in that scenario. Um, and I don't want to speak like in such a crystallized way about the evolution of humanity. I think it's really complex and it's not something that I have the capacity to really understand within myself in its fullness. But I think that I do think that the gods are a little bit of an intermediate for us to realize ourselves and look in the mirror. I don't think that the gods are within us. I think they activate things within us. I think that they are something out there, and through reading Plato, I'm maybe thinking now that the gods are stars, they're planets, they're these objects in the sky that are physically projecting a resonance that is their will, that is very powerful. And I do planetary magic, so I, really digest these energies. And so this is something where I think we take like one step forward, two steps back, but the step forward is still forward. It's like it's like we're doing the splits, philosophically in my mind, because I think we left something critical behind with the deities, and the gods are waking back up. But on the other hand, I think that um there is something we need to explore within ourselves. There is something where we need to now have an awareness, where we need to, be big boys and clean up our own messes and be conscious of ourselves and not blame everything on the gods or look for everything from the gods. I think the gods want us to be at a more evolved state, or at least some of them. Um, and I think that what that entails is us almost in a sense becoming gods, like it says. And this is something where, so I'm appealing to Crowley because I think Crowley's showing us a picture of what is just commonly known in these sort of secret societies in the sort of pan-Masonic world. And I think it's the truth. I think that and the reason I say this is because I look at Joseph Smith, and Joseph Smith, I, I'm remembering this connection now from posts in the past that I made. Joseph Smith said something similar, not so much in the sense of he said that we would all become gods later, and um, that we have that capacity as humans to become gods. But I think I have a different opinion. That really we are already gods. We're just not realized into it completely. But yeah, we have that capacity. So it's similar, and I think that that's actually very similar to what Crowley was trying to say. And there's a lot of like apparently there's a lot of people that go into scholarship comparing Crowley and um, Joseph Smith for this reason. I mean, I'm not so well read on Joseph Smith. I'm more like commenting on a passing similarity that I think has interwoven philosophical implications. Um, but I think it's a safe assertion to not a safe assertion. It's maybe not such a strange speculation to say that it kind of sounds like a lot of this pan-Masonic world is thinking in these terms that especially and this is borderline a conspiracy theory, but like Hollywood being the Luciferian Gnostic. Okay, it's a conspiracy theory, but basically every movie that comes through Hollywood tells the same story, kind of thing. That you know it's within you. The power is within you. The godship is within you. And I think that this interlocks. I think this is where Crowley explains a lot of noise really well, because it's just true will. It's because okay, like the manifestation community, and I'm throwing a lot of things out there, but I'm trying to sort of shotgun these things and make a constellation of the bullet holes and say that from all these different sides we can get some kind of idea of what's in this black box in the Schrodinger's in the box of anyways, what's in the black box that is in the pan-Masonic, like what is this worldview? What does it mean, kind of thing. like in the manifestation community, which has mostly been influenced by Neville Goddard, who was a Freemason. I don't know if his teachings are, purely from Freemasonry or if they sort of appropriated them or whatever, but his is very much like mental manifestation. Like I think about something and then it will come to be. And a lot of people have success with this, but I think true will is almost more interesting and more powerful because sometimes you want something with your mind, but there's some blockage because there's something higher that's stopping you, or you want to get out of a rut in your life but you can't, and maybe it serves some purpose that you and your body, in your consciousness, your conscious mind can't handle. I think there's a lot of things like that. It's quite what's the word, it's borderline superstitious, but I think this is one of those things where it's like what most people would consider delusion, I would consider, even if you're wrong about something, you're sort of making it true. And as one increases one's life force, you can more and more like make things true in a way. And I've seen this for myself in my own life. And it's kind of like if we look at Yogananda, Paramahansa, yogis like that, they'll say similar things. Um, you know, it's a tough thing because this is really getting into the realm of esoterics where like one dude said one thing one time, and it's not like a big philosophical tradition that hundreds of people are studied up on, that there's books out, that it's a big precedent that changed the age. It's more like one dude said it who's out on a mountain that doesn't talk to anyone, and supposedly talks to aliens or whatever. But I guess I'm appealing to that fringe that is so often sort of self like a lot of things at the fringe in different places are sort of confirming each other. Like for example, I've talking to various schizophrenic people or even looking things up about them. Often they'll have the same delusions. Why? I think it's because these delusions are true in some way. You know what I mean? So it's a complex argument, but I think that there's sort of this black box that we can't touch that's trying to tell us something. Like the Schrodinger's cat in the box is trying to communicate with us, and we sort of have to use clues to figure out what it's trying to say, almost. So I hope that argument makes sense. It's a little bit I suppose it's a bit lopsided, but I think that that's almost fitting for the topic.
Okay. Do you want me to respond? I want to respond to I have a response to you, but I want to address. I wasn't actually gonna. You pulled something out right at the last minute that I wanted to address. That I was hoping that you were gonna say.
Nice.
Basically, at the last minute. Um. So I wanted to address what I'm calling quantum occultism, or the quantum pivot, which you did at the last moment, where occultists attempt to rescue the true will by hiding it in the unobservable realms of non-locality or subatomic flux. So I'm going to deploy Nietzsche and his criticism of the backworldsman or the hinterwelter. In Nietzsche's view, any attempt to move the self into a hidden dimension, be it in the heaven or the quantum realm, is merely a sophisticated form of escapism, a high IQ way of hating the reality of the flesh. If my honorable opponent here attempts to retreat from the biological reality of the quantum or the non-local into the quantum or the non-local, let us be clear that this is nothing more than Neoplatonism in a lab coat. You're attempting to resuscitate the world of forms by misusing the vocabulary of modern physics. Nietzsche reserved his sharpest vitriol for the hinterwelter, the backworlds, or those who invent backworlds, because they find this world insufficient. To claim the true will resides in a non-local quantum field or subatomic realm, or if you will, quantum occultism, where they kind of combine, which is literally what we just heard. We combine Schrodinger's cat with the other observations and other stuff like that. It's to claim the true will resides in a non-local realm, essentially. It's an attempt of it's a last gasp of soul superstition. It's an admission that the will cannot survive the scrutiny of Darwinianism, of the Darwinian era, and it seeks to hide itself basically, and it could cloak itself in like the language of physics, essentially, hoping to provide um some shreds of like authenticity. Perhaps it's the same way that some other fields that are not scientific, that are not STEM, like to use science vocabulary in order to make themselves like call, like for example, like political science, like they have to add science to it. Like psychology, they like to add science because otherwise it would just be a lot of more pseudoscience, essentially. We are not stars anchored in a quantum field. We're a process occurring in a biological theater. To suggest otherwise is to prove Nietzsche's point that you are a despiser of the body who would rather believe in a subatomic ghost than face the terrifying freedom of being an accidental animal in a blind universe. Socrates demanded, know thyself, but Nietzsche recognized that the self is not a static entity to be found, it is a fiction to be overcome. Crowley's true will is merely a metaphysical participation trophy, as Kant attempted to ground morality in the categorical imperative of reason. Crowley attempts to ground it in the whim of the individual. Both fail because they assume there is a ground to stand on. And I would say that now I've addressed basically all of the stuff you said at the end. And now I want to bring it back to the beginning and address everything that you said at the beginning. Uh, it sounds like that the occultists want the jester's privilege, but without the philosopher's shadow. If God is dead, as the gay sciences proclaimed, then the entire project of sacred morality, even Crowley's, is incinerated. We do not move from the old aeon to the new aeon. We move from myth to power. We do not do what thou wilt because a spirit told us to. We command ourselves because there is nothing else left. The true self, the final idol. And moral relativism is, in my opinion, a coward's exit from the death of God. And I was hoping that you would bring up Plato because Plato understood that without objective form, we are lost in the cave of allegory. Nietzsche agrees we are in the cave, but he mocks those who try to paint thalamic murals on the wall and call it freedom. If we are to accept the Darwinian premise, we must accept the consequences. There is no true will, only the will to power. To suggest that every man or every woman is a star is a charming poetic oxymoron, but it is a democratized mysticism. It is the herd speaking. Mystical explanations are thought to be deep. The truth is, they are not even shallow. Friedrich Nietzsche. It is the herd trying to convince itself that everyone is a king. Soren Kierkegaard understood that the leap of faith required to find meaning, but the Nietzschean position refuses to leap. We do not leap into a new myth. We create our own values. We are the will to power.
You said that we create our own values.
But we're not appealing as biological beings, though. I'm not appealing to, I'm not, you have to remember that we create our own values through the human will to power. So I'm defeating the true will, and I've cast aside moral relativism because you're assuming. Yeah, because see, this is what I'm saying. You're thinking that I'm saying we create our own values outside. No, the values that we have are biological, and the will to power is like a biological thing. It's not removed
Uh,
into the spiritual realm. That's what I'm saying. It's different than the one you're describing. My one is a Darwinian one that is like the great individual, where it's not the spiritual appeal to a spiritual realm for that will. It is within you.
so if a being had different bodies, they would have a different ultimate reality practically because
If
they're
you
bi
well if you say like for example the morality of the master is different than the morality of the herd, so yes, there's two different kinds of people in that sense. There's like great men and great women that are part of the master morality, and then there's like the rest of the plebs that are part of the herd. So like I'm saying, I'm appealing to a moral system. You're saying that moral relativism would say that that's not true, and that it's all basically subjective and it all depends. And I'm disagreeing with that. I'm saying that there is an objective system, and I'm making an appeal to this particular one that exists, and I'm saying that this one is relevant. If you are, unless you're going to dispense with modernity, with Darwinism, with evolution, and with Nietzsche. And I think it would be very hard for the modern world to detach itself from these concepts.
Honestly, to some extent, I kind of would, but I'll I'll go on a tangent here for a moment, but I'll say and kind of leave that out. But I'll go on a tangent and explain a little bit. I think that the modern world, this is one thing where the modern world has gone futuristic and is going, I think, in a direction that we're expanding. But I think we left really critical stuff behind, and I think there's almost I have this feeling, and this is, this isn't this is just something I've sensed, something that's come to me through the air, that as if, to go one step forward, we also have to go one step back. Like to get something good, you also have to take some of the nonsense with it. Like there's some things that are futuristic, and the Enlightenment took us ahead, but also we lost some things, and I think we lost some of the, even to say the power of fantasy, if I want to agree, but I would say more, witches being able to use their consciousness and or well, witches has a bit of a bad connotation, but like in the past, people would do spells and that was effective, and they relied on such things, and over time, there became more animosity against such things. The system, I think, in my opinion, the system before basically worked, and we moved forward, and I think it makes sense why we moved forward, and I think we have gone onto new ground that is, you know, expansive, but I think we did leave things behind in the process of moving forward, and I think that the resurgence of spirituality is actually we're picking up the things we left behind. That there's a meeting of science and spirituality coming now. That's what I think. That's what I'm anticipating. But
Isn't that literally quantum occultism? Isn't that literally what I already debunked earlier?
um, I mean, I would say that
That's
that
just the God of the gaps argument. That's just a repackaged God of the gaps argument.
I guess how so?
Because the God of the gaps argument basically says that wherever wherever there be lack of understanding, there be the spirits and dragons, essentially. And I think that the problem with this argument is that the more that we understand science, and the more that I think that, okay, I'll put it this way. I think that if you're making an appeal to the past or an appeal to the future, that's still an objective moral stance. So you're basically making my argument for me. You're basically dispensed with your own argument. And I agree with you. Yes, there's a lot of stuff in the past that we should be appealing to. I'm obviously doing that right now when I'm using Plato and Socrates and Nietzsche and Darwin. These are all people from the past. They're no longer with us, right? So obviously, I'm not dispensing with the people from the past. I'm basically dispensing with the morality of the herd, and the herd morality says, do what thou wilt.
See, to me, you said that I'm dressing up Neoplatonism with and what is it? Modern clothing and
A
modern
lab, a
lab coat.
lab coat. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean to, actually the thing is I don't mean to dress it up in a lab coat. I mean to just have it be out in the forest, you know, with dreadlocks and, Rudraksha beads on or whatever spiritual thing. A wizard's hat with
Mhm.
stars on it. I mean to dress it up like that. I think the reality really is very mutable. So I guess in the sense I'm making an appeal to the deep past. Like, I want to mention the Bible here, even though the Bible I think has a lot of issues with it, and it's very sticky because of how much history has manifested out of it, and we have so much material to look at it and criticize it for good or for bad. But even some borderline superstition or something that we could look at with the Bible. Sorry, something's playing in the background. Just a moment. I'll come back. Okay. Something's playing in the background. There's practically nothing I can do to turn it off, but yeah, so yeah, no, I
I don't
think
hear
that
anything.
it is an appeal to magic. I wouldn't call it quantum occultism because I'm not trying to marry it into science.
Yeah, but as soon as you make an appeal, but you're making an appeal though, as soon as you make an appeal to authority, whether that authority is the Bible or Aleister Crowley or any of these things, you're making an appeal to authority, no? And that it means that authority, that reality is no longer subjective because as soon as you're making appeals to authority, it's not you're making an appeal to someone's universe, some person's universal system.
See, I guess I wouldn't. It's not hardly even. Maybe it's not even really an appeal to authority because I'm saying that these things existed in the
The
past and
Bible is a spiritual authority. The Bible, appealing to the Bible is a spiritual authority.
no, I guess I'm saying maybe I'm not even exactly appealing to it, but just saying that these things existed in the past and we've left certain things behind processes. But the thing is, this is something especially that's becoming interesting in the modern occult is like the Urantia books. I would say Urantia may be even more powerful than the Bible, but it's like there's so much going on now that there is also no practically no need to appeal. Maybe it's in the sense of we can just look at the vast array of things as evidence of, or I mean, maybe we don't even need evidence. Maybe we can just say people made shit up and changed their lives. Like okay, it's a little bit harsh to go this way with it with Joseph Smith. I don't believe he completely made shit up, but he wrote the Book of Mormon and then he basically just lived it out. And he changed people's consciousnesses by putting pen to paper. You know what I mean? Like that. To me, they've even just to look at that, that's very magical. And I've had similar experiences in my own life. Um, you know,